Hello, everybody. Hi, everybody. You're very welcome to this session, which is all about managing change. And we're incredibly lucky. We have some really good speakers here in this session. And they're coming from a whole load of different areas. We start with Scotland, we move to New York State, we go on to Denmark, and we finish up in the good old Grand Canal in Dublin. So we've got a really good range of speakers. And it's a really very interesting topic area because we're going to be looking at engineering, we're going to be looking at architecture, we're looking at the whole introduction of art into engineering and architecture. We're looking at the importance of public space. We're looking at the hugely pragmatic and utilitarian area of flood control. And we're also looking at developing in the core of the urban area. So we're in for a treat in terms of listening to these particular speakers who are particularly qualified in these areas to run us through their particular their presentations where they're going to actually be focusing in on their particular countries. So our first speaker today is Richard Millar, and he's from Scottish Waterways. He's the Director of Infrastructure for Scottish Waterways, and he has wears a lot of different hats. He is responsible for looking after heritage and environment, which is close to my heart. But he's also responsible for a huge amount of infrastructural projects. So it's Richard, some of the projects that Richard has been involved in include the Millennium Project, which we heard a little bit, was referenced earlier today, which was such a huge visionary project, the Falkirk Wheel. And he's also been recently involved in developing one of the first urban recreational areas in Glasgow, which was terrific. I'm really interested in hearing about that. So we look forward to hearing his presentation. And his presentation is entitled Make No Small Plans, Transforming Scottish Canals Through Art and Creative Engineering.
Thank you very much, and it's a great pleasure to be here. I've brought along, as I like to do, the photo album of Scottish canals. So we'll go back 250 years and work our way back through the history and how things have changed. And some of the challenges, the modern challenges that the canal faces, or the canals face. In Scotland, we're lucky enough to look after 4.5 of the canals that are left in Scotland, 140 miles from the Great Glen through the Caledonian Canal to the world's most beautiful shortcut on the Crinan Canal, and then to the urban canals in the lowlands with the Forth and Clyde, the world's first man-made sea-to-sea navigation, and the Union Canal stretching right into Edinburgh. And a tiny little bit of the Monkland Canal left, but I'll explain as we go through where the rest of that has gone. So we look after some amazing views in Scotland from, this is the Crinan, this is the Caledonian with Ben Nevis in the background, through to the Union Canal. There's Edinburgh Castle just sitting at the back of the Union Canal, and through the rural environment, the countryside that the canal passes through, and the urban areas that the canals pass through. And this is Glasgow here, with a small puffer passing through. And we're even lucky enough to have the world's first sail-through fish and chip shop in Clydebank, and you can see there what a wonderful place that is to visit, but recommended by certainly good fish and chips. But these canals were born from the Enlightenment. They were built 200 to 250 years ago by some amazing engineers and people with real creativity, with real understanding, from James Watt there that actually became famous for the steam engines, through to Thomas Telford, one of the greatest engineers ever, through to the artists, and Burns and Wordsworth and great poets visited these canals, and good old Leonardo come up with his mitre locks. We couldn't have done it without him. So what they built was amazing. And when you look at this is the Caledonian Canal. This is Neptune's staircase on the Caledonian Canal, through to the Avon Aqueduct. And they transformed Scotland. And you can see here, this very much could have been an EasyJet advert, unparalleled cheapness in 1820, extremely fast travel from one side of the country to the next. And you can see here the size of the industries that grew up on the banks of these canals and the puffers that passed through. And when you talk about EasyJet or Ryanair, you know, very similar. They piled them in and they packed them in close and transported them through Scotland. But slowly and surely with the canals, and certainly in the central belt, the railways started to come along, and they really did challenge the canals in the 1850s and beyond. And the railways took a lot of trade from the canals by 1900. And slowly and surely, people's view of how important these canals were, it changed. And this is a picture here from the 1950s. This was the vision for Glasgow. Canals were no longer part of that vision. This was all about motorways, postmodern buildings, and when you actually look at Glasgow, they pretty much delivered what you see in that picture with the motorways there. And they actually found the Monkland Canal as an absolute perfect way to build a motorway into Glasgow. So they filled in the Monkland Canal, they put the motorway on the top of it, and we've now got the Monkland Canal running underneath the M8 motorway. So it still remains the busiest canal in Scotland, but only for cars travelling over the top of it. 1962, Central Scotland, the Forth and Clyde Canal is closed to make way for the motorways, and the Union Canal in 1965. And once you stop up canals, once you put culverts in place and people no longer see them as belonging to them, they fell into disrepair. And these are some pictures when canals are no longer part of the community, when communities feel unempowered, that's what they do to them. This was a garage that specialised in repairing Mini Coopers. When it couldn't repair the Minis, they just let off the handbrakes and they let them roll into the canal. When we drained the canal down, 10 Minis laying down in the canal there, just degrading. And that's the sort of thing that happened. This is Mary Hill. You can see here the locks no longer used, full of rubbish, uncared for. But the community still had belief. They actually thought these canals could come back. And it was the communities that led us as the public sector to have a rethink about it. This is 1996. Our canal, our future. And the Millennium Link was born in the 1990s and fought through, and a lot of investment raised, £83.5 million to deliver a massive engineering project to find ways back through those motorways, to lift the utilities, to put a new towpath along the side of the canals, to remove the contaminated silt. And when you look at this picture, this is Wester Hales. This was a new town built near Edinburgh, no longer needed the canal, so they built roads, they built houses, they filled it in on the Union Canal there, and they never bothered to build a pavement because the car was the future. And you can see the person walking along the road there, and that's how it was treated in the 1960s, and we needed to squeeze the canal back through. So the same bridge there, put the road to the side, squeezed the canal through, and reopened the canal right back into the capital of Scotland. And this is what it did. That's what the canal did look like, and that's what the canal looks like now. £60 million of regeneration happened around and about that end of the canal almost immediately. The boats arrived. The regeneration effect grew and grew, and there's now 120 million of regeneration in that area. Out at Falkirk, there was a contaminated site. The connection between the Forth and Clyde Canal and the Union Canal had been lost in the 1930s, and the community wanted it back. And that energy was built into the Millennium Link, and we had to find a way of stretching from the top of the page there, which is the Forth and Clyde Canal, and find our way to the other side of the canal, up in the woods there on the right-hand side. Right-hand side. And you can see the challenge. That was a contaminated site that had been Scottish tar works, had burnt for many years, and we had to, as engineers, resort to what we like best, a good malt whiskey, some Technique Lego and a pen, and some very late nights, and we drew some ideas for what the Falkirk wheel could be, and some great engineers started to come up with ideas for what this could look like. Technique Lego does it every time, created a new mechanism there, and we're able to show people how the Falkirk wheel would work, and that really built people's trust and belief, and the money came in to create the Falkirk wheel. It developed on a field in Falkirk. People had all sorts of ideas as to what this was going to be, but there you go. The Falkirk wheel now welcomes 600 to 700,000 visitors a year to the site, day and night, to come out and experience, supports 60 jobs, and supports the regeneration of the local area. And as you can see from this video, it's a really important community resource. This is its 15th birthday a couple of years ago, and you can see just how the Falkirk Wheel has developed and how important it is to the local community coming out, spending days there. Even the Romans came to visit and to use the boats and to enjoy the Falkirk Wheel. A wonder of engineering that teaches kids about science, about engineering, but is also a fantastic day out. And every penny that's spent, every bit of profit goes back into reinvesting in the canals. So that's the history, really, from way back 1768 through to its really glory years in the 1820s. But we now believe that we're in a renaissance here and we can take these canals on to the next level. And we've worked, and this is Glasgow. This is the entrance to Glasgow, and it's about getting communities to take ownership because they lost ownership in the 1960s. They didn't fight when the motorways came. How can we get those communities bought in? And this was their entrance to the canal area. Really grotty, really it flooded on a regular basis and caused real problems, and we worked with the communities and got their ideas. And this was a canal job, but we transformed it through art, these giant metal petals, these giant flowers, and created a red carpet to bring people up and into North Glasgow, to get them across that motorway that had closed the canal. This is the Monkland Canal, and again, an entrance to the canal that really wasn't up to scratch. And we worked with lots of the local school kids. We got them involved. And we found that Mark Millar, who wrote things like Kingsman and Kick-Ass and things like that, and lots of comics, he used to live 3 doors down from this in the canal. And we got him involved, and the school kids just loved it. And they came up with all these themes as to how they wanted to interpret the canal. And they created these time-traveling twins. And we also found what was certainly the UK's first iron boat. And we were able to develop all of these ideas into archways, into things that celebrated the canal, celebrated the future. And that's Captain Coatbridge jumping out of the canal, saving the day, industry and heritage on one side and nature on the other. Fantastic 7-metre high archway. And this was the first iron boat in the UK. And this was a model of it that had been made in the 1980s. We found it rotting and decayed. We got the school kids involved, and they wanted to turn it into a classroom. We were able to raise £500,000 and actually transform that and create a new classroom for them. We've used art to celebrate heroes, local heroes in the area, and develop these sculptures which represent people that have been famous in the area and have delivered around and about the canal. And we've brought on artists in residence onto the canal. And this is Leslie Banks, a fantastic artist, brilliant at painting water, and she has delivered 60 paintings of the canal now and continues to run her gongoozling exhibition across the country. In Falkirk, we've worked with the community again to develop ideas for how we could connect Grangemouth and Falkirk back together. This bit of green here in the middle had been designated as green belt, and the community didn't want to be separated. There was no real way of getting underneath the motorway. They wanted to be together. They wanted to have space that they could share, and we worked with them, and over 1,000 people engaged in this project to develop a people-centric idea of how canals and how green space can bring people together. And we started bidding for a national lottery prize, and in November 2007, we won £25 million. We popped the champagne corks, we celebrated, and then we realized that the next day we had to double that money. And suddenly the recession hit, and we really struggled to get the rest of the money together, but eventually we did, and I'm so glad we did, because this was the community's vision to transform the space between Grangemouth and Falkirk into a place that people could join. They wanted a new parkland, they wanted a lagoon, they wanted a canal that connected properly with the river, and this is the community coming out to celebrate 27 kilometres of new paths being created. This scrubby bit of green space suddenly became a parkland that became famous in Scotland, and the community came out. 1 million people a year are now coming out into that green space to use it. Before that, there was probably 200-300 people, and a few deer were there, and we've now kept the deer, but we've also got the people in the space. And you can see this was the day we opened. 15,000 people on that first day came out to celebrate. What is this all about? How can we use it? and how can we have fun with canal water, even that dog drinking it there. From a canal perspective, we wanted to finish the Millennium Link. We wanted to stretch the canal back down to sea because we'd managed to get the canal to the river, but what was left, as you can see there, as you headed downstream, was a motorway bridge, a 36-inch water main, another A road, and a sewage pipeline that you had to find your way through. And the boats really did not like it, and we had to find a way of squeezing them through. So we designed a new canal that brought flood defence to Grangemouth, stretched 1 kilometre down the side of the river, and opened that in 2014. But we also knew to get the money, we needed something that would catch people's minds, their hearts and soul we needed. And we needed to create, like the Falkirk Wheel had done, a real jaw-dropping icon. So we looked to the past, we looked to the shipbuilding, we looked to the ironworks, and we looked to this wonderful legend of the world's largest horse, Canera. Not sure it was the world's largest horse, but by legend it is. Amazing what you can find on Wikipedia. That had been in Falkirk and had pulled one of our national drinks, Bar's Iron Brew, round the town, and it was very much a local hero. And we looked to this idea of the legend of the past, the Kelpies, which were mythical Scottish water horses. Nessie is meant to be a Kelpie. They had the strength of 10 horses and the endurance of many more. So we took that idea and we developed it, and we then looked around the world at some of the best art that exists across the world. And we took those ideas and we found an artist that we liked in Yellow Pages, and we got him out for dinner. And we again resorted back, actually before that, we resorted back to our whiskey, our Falkirk Wheel, and our pens, and we had a few late nights, and I think this night we might have had too much whiskey because this was the idea we came up with. 30-metre high horses' heads that would be a counterbalance to a lock chamber that would lift them out the river. We knew we hadn't quite got it right that night, so we sat down with the artist, and he started scribbling out what this could be, what we could develop, and how it could be. And he slowly and surely brought these designs together, and we knew we'd got it right when you took it out to the public and the kids started stroking the horse. It was a chunk of steel, but they kept stroking the nose of the horse and starting to wear the nose of the horse down. And this was the idea for the Kelpies. We were lucky enough to win the money. We were lucky enough as an engineer to get the biggest airfix model you could possibly ask for. We got all of these pieces of engineering, and then slowly and surely we were able to build them on site. So 3 years of design and fabrication brought together the Kelpies and delivered within 75 days. They transformed this corner of Falkirk and created these beautiful pieces of art. And you can see right through the middle of that, a lock chamber going through the middle of it. This is a welcome to Scotland. This is how you arrive through these colossus that is the Kelpies. Slowly and surely they get ears. Need to speed this up. There's some tricky lifts in the middle of this. But that gives you an idea of how canals and imagination and reimagining places can change places in literally 75 days. You get an idea of the cathedral-like space inside and the beauty of the sculpture that is there. And again, that's now bringing 1 million people into a space between a sewage plant and a motorway. It really should not work, but people are coming out to spend time, and they have ownership of these Kelpies. That's taken us global. It's taken us to Chicago, New York, and various other places across the world. We've been able to go with the Kelpies. It's got the boats coming back through the canal. It's horsed us past the winning post. It's been to the Ryder Cup twice and has helped the Europeans win the Ryder Cup. It wasn't the last one. Maybe that's something that you need to think about. But you can see here where we've been with the Kelpies, and you think how the canals have changed in 20 years. We've even had royalty visiting, and almost as an engineer, almost as exciting for me is the fact that we were able to launch the Ferrari California T at the Kelpies. That's how canals can transform. That's how people can see their communities change. And that's part of what Scottish Canals does. In literally 20 years, we've been able to take canals from places where people left their left their minis, left their sofas, put their shopping trolleys, and we've been able to transform it, and the effect has been amazing. In the last, this was a study that we did in 2015, you can see here, the canals over the last 15 years have supported 5,000 jobs. They've seen almost £1 billion worth of investment. £83.5 million in 2000 and 2001 has delivered almost £1 billion worth of investment and supported almost 5,000 construction jobs, 5,500 new houses on the banks. But the challenge continues, and my daily challenge continues, because we look after 140 miles of canal. The rebuild value of those canals is almost 1.8 billion, and that's the asset base that we look after. We get we get funding from Scottish Government, but it's not enough to manage and maintain those 4,100 assets. There's a real challenge there. And you can see from some of these pictures, that's how the challenge plays out on a daily basis. From the top right there, that's a sinkhole that's opened up because of leakage around a lock. You can see the condition of the lock chambers, the challenges with grouting, and the condition of running 1950s, 1960s technology, and in, day out, really hard to make sure that these canals continue to see the yachts through. So we've developed an asset management strategy that sets out that the investment that we need. We've got a £70 million backlog, and we've got to find ways of delivering that, and we're working closely with our partners at Scottish Government. But we're also creating our own income. And when there's asset sites laid beside the canal, like this is this is the only inland lighthouse in Scotland, but look at the condition it was in. It's now been transformed into holiday cottages where people will pay £1,000 a week to come and stay at the end of Loch Ness. But you can see the quality of it. Build the quality in, encourage people in, encourage the spend, transform buildings that look like this into that. People will spend money, and that money again gets fed straight back into the canal. From Glasgow, where there was derelict warehouses, they've been transformed into flats. People want to live on these canals now, so we have boats on the canal, we have places where people can live, and the demand is really strong. We've developed our own products, and that bottom left-hand side is a shopping trolley transferred into a chair, through to our own tweeds and our own tartans, through to the Caledonian Canal Centre that has just opened. And it's a fantastic space with a cafe, with a shop, and people spending money, but there's money then being reinvested back into the canals, right through to repurposing them for the 21st century, where we're now taking surface water from 5,000 houses and charging for that surface water to come into the canal, managing the canal dynamically so that when we know a storm's coming in, we can drop it by 100 mil and we can take that water into the canal. So to finish off, I took this picture 20 years ago, maybe a little bit more now. That is Falkirk 20 years ago. And when you think about where we've got to now, we have transformed. We still have our challenges. The asset management is hard to deal with, and we've got to keep working on that. But places can be reimagined. Places can change. Working with communities, the most amazing things can happen. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Richard. That was really incredible. And it's just amazing to see how art can influence engineering and vice versa, and how really what's so incredible is that you can give people who are in maybe deprived areas a sense of pride in the place that they live, and that they can see that they too can live in a place that's incredibly special. So that was really fabulous. Thanks a lot. Now we're moving on to our second speaker, and we welcome William Bill Miles from New York State. And Bill is an engineer with a huge amount of experience. He's got 40 years experience working in navigations, and specifically as a structural engineer for a variety of navigational structures. He's actually the technical director for Bergman's navigation structures business. Bergman is a huge consultancy company in the States. It has 400 people and 12 offices throughout the United States. He has been involved in a whole lot of projects in Canada and the United States. So he's bringing that wealth of experience here today and to talk us through projects on the Genesee River in Rochester. He's going to discuss the repair of river walls and specifically how that has impacted and ameliorated flood control. So look forward to hearing from him.
Thank you, Paula. I'm not sure I can top the Falkirk wheel and the Kelpies here, but I'll try. This is more of an urban success story. But anyway, I'm glad to be back here presenting at the World Canal Conference. My talk today really is about the exciting developments in Rochester, New York, and the northern part of the United States. The views on this will probably be more from an engineering firm and with some input from the city of Rochester. It really runs the gamut of restoration through reimagination. It hits the 3 R's. What you see here is a beautiful shot at nighttime of the Rochester Aqueduct. That aqueduct was the site of a popular event back in 2010 at the World Canal Conference there. Rochester was also the host of the 2000 World Canals Conference. So my change program here, managing change program, is as you see here, is roughly to look at a little bit of the location, the planning history that's gone into this, the existing river features that are there now, some things that are currently under construction, features in design currently, and then looking at the new initiative called Rock the Riverway. You'll hear more about that shortly. If you look at a regional map, this is a simplified version, but the Genesee River runs up from the northern part of the state of Pennsylvania up through New York State to Lake Ontario, one of the Great Lakes. It's controlled by two basic dam features. One, the Mount Morris Dam, which is about a 50-meter tall fixed concrete crest dam. It has sluices in the base of the dam. And then that runs about 50 miles or so to the north until it hits the Court Street Dam, which you see in the upper picture there. That's 4 sector gates. It's about 100 meters in width of the or length of the dam, about 7 meters tall, and those sector gates are submersible hinged gates. Here's another graphic that kind of shows you some of the things I'm going to talk about here. If you look in the very upper left, you see the arrow pointing to Brooks Landing. That's a development along the river. As you come then down the river, you get to the University of Rochester. You get to, on the west side, 2 of the developments called the Plex neighborhood and the Cornhill neighborhood. On the other side of the river, on the east side, you see the East River Wall. Back on the west side, as you're going north, you see Cornhill Landing. So the structure's in the brown there. And then the dark dashed line is actually the original line of the Erie Canal. Came downtown and went across the aqueduct. Number 1 is the Broad Street Aqueduct. That was what you saw in the picture to start the presentation. And that aqueduct goes over to the feature number 2, which is the Blue Cross Arena, which is the main facility for events and stuff in Rochester. So that's kind of the course of the study here and this presentation. So looking a little bit at the planning history, this is really about a 30-year planning effort. As you see, it went from a quarter land use and development plans back in the mid to late 80s through this Rock the Riverway initiative in the current time. But you can see the escalation of the program. It is increased in activity. What was 5 or 6 years in the making of each of the earlier events is now in a year-to-year effort. So the story is growing. Our story is growing. Resurgence in the corridor is definitely on the rise. The Genesee River has become the the centerpiece of downtown again, as it was in the 18 and 1900s. And our planning efforts have come to fruition, or beginning to come to fruition. So some of these existing features that have occurred over the recent years. In 1999, the rehabilitation of the East River Wall was undertaken and completed. You see the left picture. That's a shot across the river looking from the west to the east. And so the river wall was rebuilt. Some of the monoliths needed to be anchored because of stability requirements. And then you see the finished products on the right, looking north and south along the pathway. It acts as the trailway for runners and bikers and that sort. And it creates a nice venue along the river on the east side. So that was 1999. Then in around 2000, the Cornhill Landing, a private development, opened up along the west side of the river. There you see the basic structure of Cornhill. And some of the features of that, you see new shops and restaurants, a new boat dock and trailway that continues the trailway along the west side. And then you see the new apartments that were built. Along the way, it was also improved the flood protection within that area. So the wall was kept to the flood heights, and there were some berm activities also included in this. Shortly after that, Brooks Landing is a program that was developed. It was about 2 miles upstream of the other facilities, and that was completed in 2005 as a fixed concrete dock for boat docking. It has a new motel, which is currently the Staybridges Suite, and then a multi-purpose center that's also adjacent to the new motel. So that was all in private money. The dock itself was in city funds. So currently, there's construction ongoing for some new features along the river. What you see on the left is the river wall being rebuilt, again, to improve the confidence in flood protection through there. Now that's actually downstream of the Court Street Dam that you see kind of in the right background. But that wall was restored with concrete, with form liners to make it look like it was a masonry wall. So it was a kind of a combination of new and old materials. Along that, also the raceway that fed water along the east side of the river was rebuilt. That's what you see in the middle section. That's called the Johnson Seymour Raceway. That used to feed water to the Rundell Library and downstream to other facilities, to mills and sorts like that that ran industries. And then you also see it's a trailway continuation from Court Street Bridge over to the trail. It goes around the most popular restaurant, the Dinosaur Barbecue, in that area. And some of the other current construction that's adjacent to that is called the Nathaniel. It's being constructed this year and next year. It's a large 5-story building, mostly for residential apartments. It's the backside of the Promenade Foundation. It's about 600 meters or 600 feet long, about 180 meters long, and it again is 5 stories tall. Originally, it was envisioned that this building would have some openings so you could see the river, but sometimes you have to be careful what you get. This 600-foot-long building basically blocks the view from the east side, so you don't actually see the river through there. And it also blocked the original canal pass, so now anyone who wants to restore the canal, it would be prohibitive to do that. So sometimes what you what you get is not exactly what you start off wanting. You see some pictures on the bottom there. Those are just the views from the different elevations from the north, looking from the river on the other side from the west, and the east elevation. And also currently in features in design, we're working on the two segments of West River Wall on the other side of the river. You can see the degradation of the wall in the left side. And you can, the middle picture is looking down on the wall. You can see it's kind of deteriorated in its course. That's looking down from the historic 4th Street Bridge. This is in the Cornhill neighborhood. And currently there's plans and specs are in 50% design, and there was a master plan completed in 2016. So this is about 800 meters of wall and berm. It's intended to improve the flood protection. Obviously, when you have notches in the wall, that doesn't satisfy FEMA flood protection requirements. So the people behind the wall, in some cases, have to pay flood insurance on their property. So the idea is to rebuild the wall or to put up a berm to basically provide that flood protection and take that necessity away. You see in the upper right-hand photograph there of how deteriorated the wall is in sorts. That's the north end near Cornhill Landing. And the whole thing is a trailway. So that's what's called segment 1 of the West River Wall. Segment 2 is just to the south of that, just to the south of 4th Street Bridge. It's currently in preliminary design, and it should be completed in final design and plans and specs by the end of 2019. This is considered the Plex neighborhood as far as the neighborhood name goes. The ideas are, again, to provide river access and flood protection. This is about 1,000 meters worth of wall or berm structure. You can see some places the wall is taller. On the left, you see the degradation at the joints of the wall, and in the center you see the trailway, and on the right side you see a lower wall. In that case, the ground is elevation enough that provides its significant flood protection as necessary. Here's some visionary photographs, are just renderings of the sites. This is what it is intended to look like. This is shots from the master planning that's been done over the last couple of years. So again, Cornhill and Vacuum Oil is the segments 1 and 2. So you can see how it's opened up. It intends to be able to see the waterfront more openly. The pictures of the wall before had a lot of vegetation growing up. So now you're opening up to access to the communities, and so you either have walls or berms. Here's again another collage of renderings. And you see how it envisions various gathering sites, areas that take you right down to the river. You can have boating docks along the river. So these are just some of the concepts. None of this is really cast in stone. The wall itself will be at least partially paid for by the state, because it is part of the canal system, and it's their ownership of the wall. But the developments along the river, that would be the requirements of the city to provide the funding for that. And then the exciting thing happened in early this year, in 2018. They announced the Rock the Riverway. So this was, we had been doing these projects along every couple years. You know, some things are in construction. We thought, well, maybe that's kind of it for a while, but there's a grant system in New York State that provides assistance or startup money for various projects around the state, and the city applied for that. So and won an award of $50 million, which was announced in February. You can see it's kind of divided up into 3 areas there of the river. So it's called the South River, the downtown portion, and High Falls as you go south to north. And if you could read the small print, you'd see some of the potential projects there. There was something about 30 projects developed in concept with the idea of competing for that money. And then this August 1st, so just a month or so ago, the governor of New York State, Andrew Cuomo, visited Rochester and announced that 13 of the projects would get the funding, would get the $50 million. So there was seed money out there put in place for each of those projects. They were the designated projects. They get anywhere from $1 to $20 million apiece. That's not enough money to complete any of those given projects, but it's a good amount of money to get them started. So the city and interested parties and the private industry is going to have to come up with more funds to make each of those happen, but that's the plan. Some other things that are kind of happening along with this. This fall, actually about a month from now, the New York State Canals Conference will be held in Staten Island, which is downstate, outside New York City. It's one of the 5 boroughs. And there's going to be more news on this Rock the Riverway presented there at that time. One of the main projects, initial projects for the canal, or for the waterfront there, is the aqueduct improvements. What you see in the upper right-hand side is Broad Street Aqueduct today, looking from the top. So it's a roadway. It's got a bike path, and the top of that aqueduct will be taken off, and the aqueduct will be rewatered. If anybody went to the World Canals Conference in 2010 and went to Dinner in the Ditch, you saw the inside of the aqueduct. Well, there's going to be water placed in it. The ends of that area will have tiered entrances and fountains, so that'll all be developed in a nice way. So that's one of the first projects of the 13 that's going to be developed here. So that got a decent amount of money out of the $50 million. And then also in Rochester, we're in the process of applying for the 2022 New York State Canals Conference to be back in Rochester. And so hopefully by then we will have some progress on all these projects. So that completes my presentation. What you see here is just to end a little bit. I started off with the aqueduct in its glory at night, and this is a rendering, a painting that a local college professor painted the wall on the southwest corner of the aqueduct. If you went to the Dinner in the Ditch, you would go down just around where that railing is, and that was the entrance back then to it. But so this is just another little feature there. So thank you for your time.
Very good. Thanks, Bill, for that. I mean, it's amazing to see the length of time you're talking about over a period of 30 years, the amount of time these kind of projects take, because obviously the huge degree of complexity, the costs involved, all of that. It's hugely interesting to say these things take a lot of time, but they're certainly very worthwhile. And just the sheer extensiveness of what you were discussing there just shows that. And we look forward to hearing about Rock the River maybe in a couple of years at future canal conferences. We're going to go back across the Atlantic now to Denmark, and our next speaker is Henning Stuben. And Henning is the co-founder of Urban Agency, which is a leading Copenhagen office and consultancy dealing in development, waterway development, waterfront development projects. And Henning himself is considered to be one of the leading experts for waterfront developments in Northern Europe. He has done a lot of work in Germany and in Scandinavian countries. And he's been in charge of a number of important international commissions and competitions like Calvbod Waves. I'm sure I'm not pronouncing that right, but anyway, that's, my worst Danish accent. I'm sure Henning will pronounce it properly for us. But that's in Copenhagen. The iceberg dwellings in Aarhus. I have visited Aarhus, but I'm looking forward to hearing about that. And the Lille Youth Centre in France. So we look forward to hearing about those.
So we are an architectural office that works a lot with the waterfront. We also do just whatever housing projects and urban planning and whatever comes along. But for some reason, we came into this niche of looking at giving access to water. The three projects that you see here is the four projects that you see here. Two of them I'm going to look more closely into, show that how we somehow on different scales and on different levels always deal with this aspect of giving access to the water and the relation of the human body to the water and the water level. If you see what has been shown here from both England and the United States, if you might notice that in Denmark there is no you don't have to have a fence if you are on the waterfront. So any kind of access to the water, you have to take care of your children yourself, because they just say this is part of our urban landscape, and you basically just have to deal with it. If you fall in, you don't die. And it makes a big difference if you see some of the images that you get a much closer relation to the waterfront. So the first one is a harbor bath in a little town called Faubourg on the island of Fyn, and it was finished in 2015. This is the city, and this is one of the images from the competition that we won, where one of the conservative mayors of the city came to me and said, this is the reason why you won the competition. You can't see it. You basically integrated it so well into our coastline that you can't even find it. So it's this thing I'm going to talk about, and it was basically taking up some of this that is there already. So we had a relatively dead promenade here, and we have a beautiful city with a beautiful skylines with one or two little towers that is a bit on a hill, and they were very afraid of building something that takes the attention from the city center. So we try to be as kind of humble as possible, and I'm going to show you how it worked. So this is the site. This is an existing canal that leads to a motorboat harbor here, and then there's a kind of a ferry harbor and a kind of yacht harbor all the way up. And this was this kind of very very dead part of the waterfront behind a station that was abandoned, and it's very close to the city center. So the brief was basically asking us to find a way to get the Faubourg citizen back to the water in this space, and how can we make them use the water. So for us, it was very important to look at what is the situation here. We have a kind of a link along the promenade. We have a link back to the city center. There's some cultural facilities here, and what we actually want people to do is to use the water for bathing, for kayaking, to just relax at the water. So we made a series of diagrams of different different kind of functions that we could imagine could happen here, and designed in a way what we call the finger plan, where we said there could be one pier that is dedicated to children. There's one that is for young adults, like people who just want to go wild and jump from the jumping tower. And then there was a whole function of kayaking, because part of the money was from something called the Blue Support Point, which is basically an organization that organizes kayak routes along the archipelago there, and they needed a kind of point where you could wash your clothes or have a warm meal or something while you basically on this kind of kayak camping holiday. So this is a on-land part of the development, and these are the piers that stick into the water, and then in between the piers are the different water activities that we had. And already in the competition, we were very, it was very important for us to show that we stay in like a one-story height and we leave the skyline of the city intact behind, and then deal with different kind of relation to the water, being up on a jumping tower or on a roof of a boat storage space and a sauna, and then somewhere all the way down where you can stick your feet into the water. So this is this was in the primarily design phase, where we illustrated in the render how this would look, and explained that the main square becomes the kind of cross point of the promenade that leads along the canal and along the existing promenade, and becomes this kind of hangout and meeting space along the promenade, all related to these kayak users as well. Very early in the process, after we had won the competitions, there was a series of 5 workshops where we invited all stakeholders, like the local kayak club and the local winter bathing club, and all these stakeholders, in order to make something that they get ownership of and feel closely related to. And we explained the project very simply and said, actually what we want to do is a classic Danish bathing bridge, or like a jetty, where you have just piles and you walk on a wooden deck, but we want to work with it and change the relation of the water, and sometimes it can flood a bit, so we started tilting it and work with steps, and thereby creating more variety in the way you can experience water. So you have all these different heights where you can sit and lay down, or you have the kayak ponton where the kayaks arrive, and you get a more kind of lively relation to the water. And then this is the kids area, which ended up looking a little less rational, a little more rational, but it's basically a floating bathing area. So you have like a bottom piece, so there's always the same height in these basins, so kids know what they go into, and there's a water playground. And when you communicate, like it's one of the important things is how you can sell this idea also in relation to how it can work over the seasons. So it's not only super active in the summer, but actually there's a very lively community of winter bathers who also go out here, and like even when you have ice on the water, which you don't get here, but you have different functions that have different intensities over the year, but people do kayak also in the winter and so on. So there was much attention to how we actually imagine that the different functions can work together to activate it all year round. This is one of the illustrations we made for the competition. And yeah, from that step on, it got basically real. So this was a competition entry where they had the foundings, but it turned out that what we were doing here was actually going to be slightly more expensive than what they had money for. There was no, in our competition, there was no, we didn't have to calculate exactly, it was more like an ideas competition. But we were actually quite happy that what turned out is actually very much as we had it. They had like a second phase where this blue support point would become very much bigger. But in a way, we felt like we could keep the idea of the project intact, although we went through whatever 30% savings or something. So this is now where we build up the project, and you start seeing this point where life meets like the different canal tracks and this kind of clubhouse that is in the background. And it's all based on a simple wooden construction, sometimes supported with a few. Like when we get higher, there's some steel piling, but in general, it's a simple construction, and this is how it lies there now, and basically, yeah, gives this you come from the city and you get invited into the water on different levels. So this is then one of these kayak tour events where the door is open and everybody can go in and out, and this plaza in the middle gets activated by all the people that either just walk by or somebody explaining something here on the amphitheater and explaining how you paddle, or like just small interventions that makes it usable on all different kind of levels. Accessible roofs to also give vistas over the water, and you see the nice old tower in the background, and how then these steppings create some niches and a little moments of silence and relaxation in some corners. And this is a stand-up paddling club coming in. You see these were the only people that were complaining, and of course I don't really understand it because they got a swimming pool for free, but they felt like, oh, it's going to be noisy, and then they were the first to come and jump into the water, of course. This is the sauna with a panorama window over the water. This is then the local sauna club. This is the edge of the children's basin, where you see there's like a kind of floor in it with holes so the water can go through, and you always have the same level of water. And it's for all generations. It's like young people, old people, and it really turned into a location. This is my favorite picture. It's like the photographer asked him to have a blue bathing suit on, but it was a complete coincidence. And it's one of these sauna club events. And this is the water playground. The biggest problem was that after we had installed everything, we found out that there's a regulation in Denmark that you're not allowed to use salt water in playgrounds. So for some time it was connected to fresh water, but then everybody realized it was so stupid that you could go 5 meters and play in the salt water, but you were not allowed to play on a playground with salt water, but they changed it. So this is a summer day that shows how the different activities. This is the jumping tower. This is a pier that goes furthest out and into the water, where you have then the height that you can actually jump into the water. And kids do all kind of crazy things. You see the kayakers in the background, and sometimes it's just also a place to relax and kiss. The next one is now in a more urban setting. This is in the center of Copenhagen. Again, we were not really involved in the funding. There was money in the first place, so we were, again, going through 30% of saving, because what we had developed first was too expensive. But that's one of the main things that I'm really excited about, is that if you have to make it work and maintain the idea, although you maybe have much less money than you expected in the first place. In both these projects, there's a foundation that was involved, and they take lottery money and put it into kind of sports and movement in public space. And they also gave a lot of money to this. So we are in the city center. We're in the city center of Copenhagen. We were part of a project called the Metropolitan Area to activate certain spots in the center of Copenhagen that were basically deserted. And we have this promenade, and while we here on this side had a very active development with the harbor bath and like a critical mass of people living there who actually use this waterfront, which is very much developed kind of bottom up. The municipality of Copenhagen in the 80s, on the other side, made the mistake to just, because they needed money, to sell the land to totally uninspiring developers who basically just made some headquarter buildings. This is a hotel and this is a bank. And so we got this very stony promenade that had relatively high distance also to the water. It's like 1.70 meters down. And on the other side, you had this kind of, you can almost say it's like a people's park. It was really developed bottom up, and they found a boat and they put it upside down and made a roof and all kind of funny things. I was also involved in the harbor bath, but I always was somehow wondering why it cannot work on the actual inner city side, which is where you expect these kind of things to happen. So while we had this, this is what it looked from the hotel. Even the hotel, where you would expect that they would have a terrace or areas to sit outside, they had no ambition whatsoever to involve the water. So this is the hotel facade. It's not even like a terrace door to sit outside or something. So what we said is, fine, we have the promenade. It's actually owned by the bank. So unfortunately, we need to make a promenade next to the existing promenade because they were absolutely not interested in any public life. So we said, no, then we just do our own thing. The kind of Copenhagen Waterways, they own the harbor basin, so then we must just do something public in the basin. Problem was that, especially in the evening hours, we were in the shadow with part of our promenade. So we decided we have to somehow work around these and make the gravity points of our development in the areas between the building, and then basically make a connection back to the hinterland at these points as well, to get like access to people and to people to come to this place. So we made a lot of sun analysis studies and looked at what can we do, how can we get this, and decided then to make two kind of concrete hearts out of in situ concrete, and then this wooden deck around that connects the two main islands to the existing promenade. Underneath there was then a kayak hotel where you can place your hotel, or where you can place your own kayak for whatever, €200 a year. You can rent a space, and then you can after hour go here and kayak and put it back in, or you can just rent a kayak. And on the other side is something called the kind of, it was for kids to go and be able to experience water. This is with the school and so on. It was actually one of the things that never really got funding. But there's another funny story about that. So this is then some illustrations of what we had in mind, and this is then during the construction time. There was in the competition, there was all kind of different ideas of how to integrate kayak storage. Harbor taxi should come and create some areas that also can be used to just serve a coffee and so on. Problem with this is that this was the idea of a triangular basketball court right next to the bank, including the existing kind of stairs they have to the waterfront. And that was another thing. We don't want anybody playing basketball right next to our headquarters. It makes so much noise. And the second person who held a speech at the opening ceremony was the leader of the bank. And we had to, or the municipality actually had to threaten them to, I don't know what's called in English, depropertize or whatever, like to take part of the promenade from them in order to at all get them into the boat. So they were basically saying they can do that in infrastructure projects, that they say, okay, we want this to happen, so you have to give us the land. And then they, like, 5% of the budget was spent on lawyers discussing with the bank, and then the first thing is when it's there, they're like, yeah, and it's so nice right in front of us, and this is then the whole project was made in BIM, so in a kind of basically every screw was drawn in advance and was prefabricated. All the steel work was coming from Poland, and then the in situ concrete was made on the site, and that made it very well manageable and organizable to the building process. It was relatively efficient. So this is now standing on the roof of the hotel, and there's some nice stories about, like, this was the saving. We had this basketball court, but then part of the saving was just maybe we just keep the existing, like, stair here that is owned by the bank, and we make a little basin. And now, this is one of the concrete islands where this is not really a summer day. This is then a good day here with a lot of people on the harbor bass, but now also on the other side using the promenade on the city center side. And although in the beginning you were not allowed to bath, now you're actually also allowed to bath here, as you see. And it's again all about the relation of the body to the water, and sometimes you feel like This foundation with lottery money, they have these ideas what should be happening, and they said there must be like a jungle gym kind of thing. So we made one thing I'm going to show you in a minute, and this was the idea of making a kayak slide. At the end, it was a bit too dangerous, I think, and there was only few kayakers with helmets that were using them, but the kids started using it as a jumping tower. And the whole lower level can flood, so we had to put the facilities that we have as changing rooms and so on in containers in order to be able to just close the doors and let the water go up. And unfortunately, already in the first winter, the water got up all the way to here, but it worked. And all the materials are basically referring to maritime materials like oak tree and, okay, I'm stopping. Last images, kayak polo field. And this is one of the moments where you feel like you're actually on a boat on one of the high points, and another point low where you just can be on your own and even in the winter enjoy a moment of sun. And the nicest thing is that people start taking it on in their own, like with their own ideas. Here, some kids just put a piece of wood, and then they go down with a skateboard and they jump into the water, and the wood stops the skateboard. This is one of the people who actually did do the jump. Or our saving hole here became into a slackline place. This is a skateboarder. And just very briefly, this is a jungle gym, which is like folded out of one piece of steel and has all kind of different features. So it's both for people who go jogging and have a little jungle gym moment, or just a playground. And I'm finished right now. So after the success of this, and I mean, when I got here, this was one of the first days after the opening. It was also lucky it was so good weather, but you feel like, wow, it really works. And then in our Dublin office, somebody said, why can't we make it also work in Dublin? And made a little collage where we basically just changed the background and said what would happen if we would make it in Grand Canal dock, and just put it in, and it ended up in the Irish Times as an idea for how you can actually activate the dock. Thank you very much.
Henning, that was terrific, and it was really lovely seeing those design concepts come right through from drawings, and then seeing people actually jumping off and diving off from fantastic looking jetties and play spaces. And really was great to see superimposed in Grand Canal Dock, so you never know what's going to happen there. And that's the intro for our next speaker. And we have Terre Duffy. Terre works at Waterways Ireland. She has almost 30 years or more in the whole area of culture, tourism development, and she's working now specifically in the Docklands area. She's the manager driving the whole development of the Docklands, and specifically the water quarter in Dublin's Docklands. And Terre has tremendous strengths in terms of strategy and strategic development, and I've worked closely with her, and I've seen her work very closely with Dublin City Council and Fáilte Ireland in developing policy and developing strategies to try to get something like the water quarter actually up and running in Dublin. So we look forward to hearing from Terre.
Thank you, Paula, and it's great to be here today in what I consider family. I hope you accept when I call us all canal nerds or canal lovers or canal enthusiasts, and I feel like I'm right at home amongst you all today, so it's great to be here. I've started off by calling it the Docklands Ambition because we're in our early stages. The Docklands team of Waterways Ireland, it's a small team. We're 2.5 people, and we're in existence for 2 years. So unlike Richard or Will or Henning, I hope that, Will, you'll invite me back to your Canal conference in Rochester in 2022, and I'll be able to show you the after pictures, because now we're really at the very beginning of a journey in terms of our ambition, and I wanted to lay out that ambition for you today. So it's the Docklands Ambition. Okay. So this is the Docklands. Some of you have already visited. I met you on Friday at the pre-conference tour. Grand Canal Dock is the beginning of the Grand Canal. At one stage, it was the largest dock in the world. You can see it there with some jetties on it. And I suppose, just in giving you some context, in the 70s, there's one side of Grand Canal Dock, Hanover Quay, and it was said in Dublin that it was so poisonous it could never be built on. And now this area, 50 years on, is the home to the Google European headquarters, Facebook European headquarters. We refer to it in Dublin as Silicon Dock. It just shows you how, with vision and inspiration and commitment and money, that a place can go from being so poisonous it can't be built on to this an amazing location in the middle of Dublin. But as I say, we're at the beginning of a journey because we have all these amazing companies here, but Waterways Ireland are the custodians of this remarkable asset in Grand Canal Dock and had the vision to put a team in place to lead the development of that, which is what I'm doing. So you can see here, Grand Canal Dock is on one side with the jetties. You have the River Liffey, and across the River Liffey you have the smaller second cousin, we refer to it. It's Spencer Dock, which is the beginning of the Royal Canal. So that's the area in Dublin, the aerial view. So in terms of development, and when I first started with Waterways Ireland 2 years ago, I was lucky enough to go to the World Canal Conference in Inverness, and I saw the Kelpies and the Falkir Quail and some of the major projects that Scottish Canals had undertaken. And I suppose I came back inspired in terms of big vision. If you want, as Dublin wants, to increase the number of tourists in Dublin from 7 million to 10 million over the next 10 years, to achieve that and to place ourselves as an international destination where we can attract those additional 3 million tourists, you need to think big. You need to have a big aspiration. And so although Grand Canal Dock is an amazing, and it is an amazing resource in the middle of the city, and we refer to it as the Blue Playground, in a city it's not big enough to be the destination within itself. So all of us, family, canal family, know that being on or beside the water, it does something for your soul. I'm sure there's a science behind that, but we all know instinctively that to be on or near the water, it changes something in your soul. And so this part of Dublin that I'm talking about doesn't just have Grand Canal Dock. It has 3 docks: Grand Canal Dock, Spencer Dock, and George's Dock. It has 2 rivers, the Liffey, which is the gateway into Dublin, and it has the Dodder. So 3 docks, 2 rivers. It's the beginning or end of 2 canals. So you have 3 docks, 2 rivers, and 2 canals. And as I say, it's the gateway into Dublin Bay, which is already established as a UNESCO Biosphere Site. So altogether, these are what I refer to as Dublin's Water Quarter. So this is the vision, to develop Dublin's Water Quarter, and that Grand Canal Dock then becomes the jewel in the crown of Dublin's Water Quarter. So the aim is that the Dublin Docklands team, with our partners and stakeholders, because we don't have the money to do it on our own, as Richard pointed out, for big ambition, you need partners and stakeholders to create a world-class blue playground destination that is proudly and authentically Dublin. That's important. It has to be different from Scotland. It has to be different from Rochester. It has to be different from Copenhagen, because when those 3 million extra tourists think about, where am I going to go on my holidays, they want something that's different from Copenhagen and different from Scotland and authentically Dublin, and that's what we're setting about to achieve. So something that's authentically Dublin, a place in the great outdoors that can inspire people to wellness, And that's what I was talking about. It does something for your soul. A place that is brimming with life, animation, culture, and vitality in the centre of Dublin Docklands. And I'm privileged enough to be leading the development of Grand Canal Dock as the jewel in the crown of Dublin's water quarter. So the 3 pillars will animate the waters. So we look at different activities to animate the water, because it's no good having this water body here if you can't use it, if you can't sit beside it, if you can't get on it. So we'll animate the waters. We'll make connections. So we'll make connections in 2 ways. We'll make connections in that Grand Canal Dock, connects to the Grand Canal, which connects down onto the Shannon. Next stop, America. So we'll make connections, but we'll also make connections with the communities that surround it, with the stakeholders that potentially will fund it, and ultimately the National Tourism Development Agency, who we hope will ultimately fund a significant part of it. So we'll animate the waters, we'll make connections, and we'll create a world-class destination that is essentially geared at the local, but will be amazing enough to attract the international tourist. And this is Grand Canal Dock at the moment, the jewel in the crown of the water quarter. So what are we going to do in Grand Canal Dock that sets it apart? How can we say that it's going to be the jewel in the crown? Some things are already there. Some things are already there in Grand Canal Dock. So we have a wonderful marina where we have people who live on board their boat, people who can leave their boat there, and we have commercial berths where we have developed some lovely businesses. We have a company who runs commercial activities. But in terms of master planning, for us, we have 3 big items that we are going to aim for in terms of creating a world-class destination. We're looking at a boardwalk that connects Grand Canal Dock's Dart station down the side of the inner dock to increase accessibility from the main, from city centre Dublin. And interestingly, when I started this job 2 years ago, you know, I was at home Googling at night amazing walkways and amazing bridges and what is the best around the world. And I stumbled across Urban Agency, and I was you know, looking at their bridges and thinking that that was really amazing. And actually, I had the privilege to go to Copenhagen a couple of months ago, and I spent a lovely day cycling around Copenhagen, seeing the amazing waterfront development that they're doing there. And I can attest, they're as good in the flesh as they are on Google. So we're going to develop an amazing boardwalk. We're looking at a floating market. We've already done a feasibility study looking at the idea of a floating market. The aspiration is to create something that would showcase the best of Irish craft, design and food, and that would be an anchor attraction project for Grand Canal Dock. And we're looking at what we refer to as the Dock Mile. So it's exactly a mile to walk around the outer basin of Grand Canal Dock. And just like one of the pictures that you had, Richard, where you had the red footpath, we hope that through master planning, that our master planners will be able to come up with an amazing intervention that will turn the Dock Mile from something that's ordinary into something that's extraordinary through the intervention of creativity, be that an architectural intervention or an artist intervention. Then there are other things in Grand Canal Dock. I won't go into everything just with the time, but there are other things that we're not responsible for, but will also lever additional value into Grand Canal Dock. We're working with Dublin City Council on the water quality, which will be a big, a significant investment that will truly turn Grand Canal Dock into a blue playground. U2 have a building there, and they've gone out to planning to look at a museum there. So hopefully, when I speak at the World Canal Conference in 4 years from Rochester, I'll be able to show you the after pictures of how Grand Canal Dock has been turned into this truly jewel in the crown of the water quarter. Spencer Dock On the far side of the river, in the water quarter, is Spencer Dock. Spencer Dock is the dock that's the beginning of the Royal Canal. And we are also looking at a master plan in terms of creating a remarkable destination in the city at Spencer Dock. Spencer Dock is an unusual geographical location in Dublin. On one side of the dock, you probably have the most challenged and socially deprived communities in Ireland, so much so that the government has put in place a specific task force in relation to the development of that side of the dock. Across the narrow dock is Google silicone at its best. There are apartment blocks there that have 10 swimming pools on the roof. So you couldn't get a more obvious divide between the haves and the have-nots. And Spencer Dock represents a remarkable opportunity to do something where water can be used to bridge the gap between those who have and those who have not. And we're really looking forward to coming up with the master plan. And again, hopefully I'll be able to come back and show you what the delivery of that master plan in a couple of years' time. And then, of course, the canals. We are so lucky for such a small city in Ireland to have 2 canals, and we're looking at the development of the canals in Dublin. So we're animating the canals. Again, we're creating connections and building destinations. But in terms of working on the canals, we have this idea to create a greenway. Greenway development has become a significant opportunity in Ireland for cycling, walking, and kayaking. And we're looking at developing what we're referring to as the Dublin Canal Greenway, or the 12th Lock to the 12th Lock City Cycle Group, because it goes from the 12th Lock on the Royal Canal to the 12th Lock on the Grand Canal. And we have made a significant progress in relation to the delivery of that. And we're hoping that 2019, when Dublin hosts the World City Cycle Conference, that we hopefully will be able to launch the Dublin Canal Greenway as a product. It's 40 kilometres off-road, right beside the canals. Cycling that, again, it does something for your soul, because you have the canal at your shoulder all the way along. We have the Dublin Canal Ambassador Programme. Throughout my 2 years here, I've come across some amazing people who love the canals. One of them particularly is sitting here in Mick Kinahan. People who've spent their life caring for, developing, loving, talking about, cleaning the canals. And we want to be able to grow that ambassadorial role that we have, and grow it, and to be able to share that love with others. So we've teamed up with Volunteer Ireland, and we're just about to launch a research project that will look at essentially sharing the love of the canals in the Canal Ambassador Programmes. We're running a series of events and animation programmes across the canals with different types of communities. And we have the Dublin Canal Adventure Programme, which encourages all sorts of groups to take part in adventures that allow them to share the love of the canals. And hopefully we're just beginning a lovely marketing campaign, Love Dublin Canals, which will see its culmination in spring 2019. One of the lovely things that we're going to do for the canal launch is Waterways Ireland is the custodian of an old heritage barge, the 48M, and we have been lucky enough in Dublin to be able to reimagine that, and we're going to turn that into our floating office. So that's going out to tender, and once that comes back from tender and it's ready to go, we'll use that as a platform to launch the marketing campaign in spring 2019. So we're only 2 years in, we're a small team, we have big ambition, and we look forward to sharing with you how we're going over the years in terms of delivering for Waterways Ireland a remarkable destination in Dublin. Thank you.
We just want to extend a big thank you to all our speakers for a really stimulating conversation here. You know, I have to say I thought it was really very inspiring just to see how art can be used to inform creative design, engineering, and just to see how that can actually be done, and you can have such incredible outputs from it. But we also heard as well, like from Bill, that good engineering also requires rigor and consistency, and we need to have all of that in place too to fulfill all the kind of requirements we need in terms of flood control. But there's also that whole element too, that we can solve contemporary problems with simple solutions, which is really fabulous to hear, and that there's fun. I mean, that was just so lovely about Henning's talk, where we saw what was, through looking at natural light, through looking at access to the water, created these wonderful public spaces which just sang fun. And as Terry says, we're hoping to use all of those wonderful designs and inspirations in terms of us opening up the whole of Grand Canal Dock, because we have some crazy young people who want to jump off the top of buildings and jump into Grand Canal Basin, and we would be delighted to provide actual towers for them to do that. That'd be super. So we look forward to Terry bringing that to fruition, and no better woman. So I'm sure there's lots of questions, so we open up the floor now.
Tropical wood or something, so we've just made fat wooden oak tree planks. Yeah, and without any profile, we basically made them, I don't know what it's called, in Danish it's called saw rough, so it's just a saw cut, and that gives some friction, so there's no whatever kind of profiling in it, so there can be algae growing or something. We try to just make it simple and functional.
Yes, I'm delighted to meet you at last, Terry Duffy. I'm afraid I missed you at the Düsseldorf Boat Show stand in January 2017. So it's taken a long time to catch up, but at last we do now. Brilliant presentation on the ambition for Grand Canal and the water space. Just by chance, I happened to be spending the night on Friday night in Lower Baggot Street at Leeson Guest House. And just beside there, going to Henning's idea of expropriation, there is a service station I'd love you to expropriate and create a basin so that boats could go up there, turn around and come back down. You need movement through those locks on the Grand Canal to complete the picture, because otherwise there is a risk of a canal that just isn't navigated enough. That's just my personal perception. Just wanted to share that with you and ask you whether that makes sense at all.
We would certainly love to see more boats on the canals, and I think Waterways Ireland are working hard to try and grow the appreciation of what the canals offer, not just for barge owners, but for people to kayak them, to walk beside them and to run beside them, and we're certainly working on a plan there.
Hello, I just have a question for Richard. My name's Janet Gascoigne. We're just talking about using canals and boats moving on canals. I just wondered if you could give us an update on the status of the bridges on the Forth and Clyde Canal.
I think, as I said in my presentation, I think there's probably another R to be added, which is sort of retain, so restore and then retain, and that's a challenge to all of us. So we have got challenges with now 5 of our bridges, which we've been fortunate enough to get some investment from Scottish Government. So those are being worked on over the winter. They have been temporarily suspended for a little while, but they're going to be back up and open next year. So, I mean, that investment is absolutely critical. But we continue to talk to government. We continue to make the case for investment. It's often the challenge, there's often money around and about for the capital projects, but it's that sort of revenue and keeping and sustaining them. And I think I was alluding to that in my presentation around about, but we've also got to do that for ourselves. We've got to find ways of making these canals create profit and the people that use them to create the profit around and about it so that we can maintain them into the future. So some big challenges, but we're well on with those and we're innovating our way through them. So watch the space.
Just a question for Henning. I noticed your structure in Copenhagen. Is that facing the open sea? And what sort of challenges do you have? Because is it a Skagerrak or the Kattegat?
No. It's
is it
like,
is it enclosed?
It is actually salt water, so it's a harbor, but the structure is relatively far in the harbor, and then it's the Øresund, so it's the area between Sweden and Denmark. So it's not the open rough sea.
Yeah.
It's relatively natural protected already. So it's not you don't have that high waves in the little town. That's more of a problem.
Yes.
So that's where some of the piles became steel piles because of their length and so on. But the biggest problem is actually flooding, because we sometimes can have 2 meter height as a difference when especially when the wind comes and pushes the water into the harbor basin.
Yeah. Thank you.
And actually ice. Ice was another big problem. Like if you have big ice flakes that press into the structure, the engineers at some point gave up and say, if this really happens in the forest, that can maybe happen every 100 years, then we just have to build a new one, because it would be too expensive to make it resist that.
In Toronto, we have much development along the waterfront with many condominiums and many party boats and nightclubs. Have any of you got any experience with ameliorating the noise after dark? Because the new citizens on the waterfront are complaining bitterly.
Not really noise, as in our case, especially in Copenhagen, where it's maybe more relevant than in there was a row of office buildings and so on, so there is a certain distance. In a big problem, and that was one of the big negotiations with the bank, was garbage. So in the contract with the bank, there's actually a whole paragraph on how often the municipality of Copenhagen has to, in the summer months, clean the site, as they have to go there 2 or 3 times a day and empty the garbage boxes, and they had to make special pizza bins and so on. So there's a whole, like pizza box bins. There was a whole discussion about that. I know in the Copenhagen parks there's a big discussion about what you are explaining, that apparently some Danish guy invented a big boom box that can make crazy noise out of a little box, and the kids go out and they listen to very, very loud music, and it's really hard to do anything about.
We had a small problem. It wasn't in relation to the music noise. It was in relation to drumming for the dragon boats. So for a lot of us, the simple drumming is quite meditative. But if you own an apartment that lives in are in the enclosed area of Grand Canal Dock, and you come home, you're a nurse and you've been working all night, and to hear that drumming, that can be really difficult. So as we make developments on Grand Canal Dock, we are going to have to come to some arrangement with those who live there. There has to be a balance between uses, and we will be working on that. It certainly is a challenge around regeneration and development for all those who use the space. Yeah.
I mean, I guess that the boats on our canals are pretty small, so the parties are quite small. But those sort of issues do exist on occasions, but they're not a regular problem. And I guess from a noise perspective, probably more often is the cascading of the locks, and concerns around about that constant noise that's created through the cascading. So often we do work with communities, but we can find ways of dealing with that and working closely with the communities to resolve.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry, the rest of the crowd is starting to come in now, so we'll have to wrap it up. But look, a big round of applause. I think that we really enjoyed that very much. We're just going to I have some small presentations to make to our speakers, but we might go over here and take pictures, I think, maybe. That's all. And then we can
Thank you to all the speakers and to Paula for chairing that session. I just have a few closing remarks for you this evening in relation to this evening and tomorrow's activity. So, hope you all enjoyed it today. I had a lot of fun. Once you all got here, I had a lot of fun. Please check your badges to confirm if you're joining us this evening for the welcome reception and barbecue. If you would like to register for these events, if there's no little button on your badge, you can still do so at reception. For those of you that are coming to the castle, We're going to be meeting at reception at 5:30 p.m., so in about 30 minutes. It's going to be a 10-minute walk across the bridge to the castle for the welcome reception. Entrance to the castle is on an incline and it is cobbled, so please wear appropriate footwear. While the reception will be under cover of a marquee, we are outside, so please do dress appropriately. Think about layers. Also, I think it is raining, so you will need a raincoat to get there. The castle itself will be open for anyone who wants to tour inside before or after the speeches. We're going to start to return after the reception at about 7:15 in small groups again, and dinner will begin service here at about 7:30. But please feel free to stay on in the castle and tour around and come over for dinner at any time, because it will be running for an hour and a half. And it's just casual barbecue service. Just come along and help yourself whenever you're ready. Okay? In terms of tomorrow, your badge will also indicate what tour you're on. The buses outside, for those that are going by bus, will also have a sign in the window that will correspond to that. So it will say north, east, or south. The south tour, if that's your inclination, will be ask everybody to be on the bus at 7:15. 7:45. Apologies. You get a whole extra hour in bed. To be on the bus for the South Tour at 7:45, and it's just going to be outside reception. For the East Tour, we're going to meet at 7:45 in reception, and we're going to be broken down into two groups. Stay with your group all day, because you're going to be doing the reverse. One tour is going to be doing the reverse of the other. So if you switch coaches at lunchtime, you're going to do the same thing twice, folks. One of the groups on the East Tour will be going by bus, and one will be going by boat. So for that first group, they're going to be walking over towards the castle again and going round the back and down onto the waterside and getting onto an accessible craft that will take us downstream. And the first group, who are going off by coach, will be coming back by the same boat in the evening. For the North Tour, we're going to meet at 8:20. Doesn't that sound civilized? Yeah, 8:20 in reception, and again we're going to split into two groups, but we're going to head off together at about 8:30. So in terms of facilitating the early start, breakfast is going to be served from 6:30 for those of you who are enthusiastic about eating in the morning. Do dress warmly. We do have 4 seasons in one day, but we seem to have had only one today, and it involved an awful lot of water falling from the sky. So outdoor clothing, footwear, and prepare to be awake until about 6 p.m. We will have snacks on the bus, so you needn't worry about going hungry. We will have water on the bus, so don't worry about bringing big things of water with you. All delegates will have a free evening tomorrow. If you would like to make a reservation for dinner in the hotel or in a restaurant in town, do ask at reception and they'll set that up for you. I think if there are 300 people looking for dinner tomorrow night in Athlone, some of you may need to be organised, particularly if you want to be in a large enough group. Be aware that all the tours will involve some walking. If you have any concerns about the amount of walking that might be involved in the tour that you're booked on, come and talk to us at the registration desk now, and we will reassure you or switch you to another tour that has less or more walking, depending on your desire. Does anybody have any questions? No, ma'am? You may go. Class is dismissed. Have a good day tomorrow, folks.
height of it. That was one trend. Very simple, very simple. How does the wheel work?
How does the wheel work?
Yes, like
It's the most efficient boat lift in the world. And it rotates around a central wheel like 10 big motors on it. It uses about the power of 8 motors. And we just use that to brake it, to stop it, just to slow it down basically. There's a sort of main hole. These technical Legos, you've got a main hole which is the same size as the holes of the two gondolas, the two bathtubs of water, and then there's slowly wheels in between that, and it just rotates around that. Basically, I can't always the gondola has to stay in the gondola. So there's a model about 30 meters.
and how often does it run?
We operate it maybe 40, 50 times a day.
So if you have a good time to go there,
get the legs moving. Run even this half of it, and then lift her up. Okay, you want to run this through now, is it?
With Marina too, yeah.
Yeah.
It's in here. Okay. All go well for you today?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Two TV screens on the ground there. You see your presentation, hook them up.
Yeah, you're.
Clicker on the podium as well.
I should stand here. It's there, isn't it? Yeah, yeah.